On the 22nd of March 2012, three seasoned mountain bikers, Devin Matthews, Jake Rodriguez, and Marcus Thompson, set out on what was supposed to be a 5-day backcountry ride along a remote stretch of the Appalachian Trail in southwest Virginia. Only one would make it back. 2 weeks later, search crews discovered the mutilated remains of Jake and Marcus at their destroyed campsite, along with Devin's broken GoPro and damaged journal. The entries revealed a horrifying encounter with what seemed to be a Sasquatch stalking and hunting the group through the dense Appalachian wilderness. Devin Matthews, a 9-year-old extreme sports enthusiast from Charlotte, North Carolina, had been riding mountain bikes for more than 15 years. Known among friends as fearless but methodical, Devin specialized in brutal off-road terrain and had conquered some of the toughest trails across the eastern U.S. His riding partners, Jake Rodriguez and Marcus Thompson, shared his passion for pushing limits. Jake, 31, a former Marine, brought military survival skills to the adventure, while Marcus, 28, a professional photographer, documented their trips for social media and outdoor magazines. The trio planned a punishing 47-mile trek through Jefferson National Forest, notorious for steep climbs, technical descents, and primitive camping. This section of the Appalachian Trail is famous among bikers for its isolation. Some parts hadn't seen trail maintenance in more than 2 years, and cell service was virtually non-existent. The area is home to black bears, wild boar, and according to local lore, something far more dangerous. On March 24, when the group failed to reach their scheduled check-in point in Damascus, Virginia, worried family members notified authorities. A search was launched, but the sheer size of the wilderness and harsh weather slowed rescue efforts. After 8 days, the operation was suspended over safety concerns. It wasn't until April 5 that a team of rangers and volunteer searchers located what was left of their final campsite near a remote plateau in Grayson Highlands. The scene was devastating. Investigators found torn cycling clothes, scattered gear, and biological evidence pointing to a violent struggle. Most disturbing were the remains of Jake and Marcus, both showing massive trauma consistent with an attack by something extraordinarily powerful. Devin's body was never recovered, but searchers did find his waterproof journal and a badly damaged GoPro buried under debris about 100 yards from the campsite. When investigators reviewed the entries, a chilling narrative unfolded. The trip had started smoothly, with the three riders following established markers through stunning mountain terrain. Devin's early journal entries reflected excitement and the camaraderie of seasoned outdoorsmen. March 22, weather perfect for the start of our Appalachian ride. Jake's military-grade gear setup is flawless. Marcus already has enough shots to fill a magazine. Trail conditions better than expected, despite no recent maintenance. Climbed 2,400 feet today and covered 16 miles. Legs feel strong, spirits high. March 23, woke up to fog so thick you could cut it with a knife. Marcus called it mystical, but honestly, it's just creepy. The descent to White Top Laurel Creek was brutally technical. Had to push the bikes through several sections. Freshly fallen trees blocked the trail. Jake thinks last month's storms caused it, but the way they're positioned feels intentional, almost like barricades. By March 24, Devin's tone shifted dramatically when the group realized they weren't alone. Morning, March 24, strange night. All three of us kept waking up to noises. Not the usual forest stuff: owls, rustling leaves, running water. This was different. Heavy footsteps circling camp, but every time we hit the lights, nothing there. Jake checked the perimeter twice with his tactical flashlight. Found some tracks in the mud by the creek, but they were too distorted to read. Maybe just a big bear poking around our food. Night, March 24. Can't shake the feeling we're being watched. We've all admitted it now, which makes it harder to dismiss as paranoia. Marcus kept catching movement in his peripheral vision while filming, but nothing clear on the camera. The forest has gone completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. Jake says that usually means a major predator is close. We moved camp farther uphill, grounded, and double secured everything. Part of me wants to turn back, but we're committed to this route. Footage recovered from the GoPro on March 24 confirmed Devin's growing fear. The video shows the three riders tackling rough terrain, but more unsettling, it caught several instances of movement in the background, dark shapes trailing them through the forest. The quality makes positive ID impossible, but the movements look too large and purposeful to be normal wildlife. Dawn, March 25. None of us slept. Something circled camp all night, just outside the range of our lights. Around 3 a.m., Jake fired a warning shot into the air with his sidearm. The footsteps stopped immediately, but the silence afterward was even worse. In daylight, we found tracks. Not exaggerating, they're enormous. At least 18 inches long, 8 inches wide, with what looked like 5 distinct toes. Depth suggests incredible weight, maybe 400 to 500 pounds. Jake tried to measure and photograph them, but the ground was too soft for clear details. Afternoon, March 25. We've made a huge mistake. Whatever this thing is, it's not just following us, it's toying with us. Today we had to backtrack 3 times because of massive downed trees, a waterfall that hadn't been there the day before. Each time we were forced farther onto side trails, deeper into the wilderness. Marcus thought I was just being paranoid, but I checked our GPS coordinates systematically. We were being pushed away from any main trail or potential rescue route. This thing was intelligent, and it was playing with us. The journal entries reveal that by March 25, the group fully understood they were facing something far beyond a routine wildlife encounter. Jake's military training had kicked in, and he began treating the situation as a tactical survival scenario. The group set up rotating watches, rigged an improvised perimeter alarm out of their biking gear, and rationed food and water in case they needed to evacuate in a hurry. Late on March 25, Marcus finally captured something on camera. While adjusting his settings, he caught a figure in the frame, a massive, upright figure standing motionless behind a cluster of pines about 75 yards away. The creature appeared to be studying them, remaining perfectly still for nearly 30 seconds before slipping back into the trees. When they immediately reviewed the footage, the details were undeniable. This wasn't a bear, or a man in a costume, or some prank. The proportions didn't match any known animal too tall, too broad, moving with a stride that was both eerily human and profoundly alien. The recovered video from this encounter is likely the most compelling piece of evidence found at the scene. Despite distance and poor light, the camera captured a sharp silhouette of a towering humanoid form. Later, forensic analysis confirmed the footage was authentic, not tampered with, and based on the surrounding trees for scale, the figure stood at least 8 to 9 feet tall. Morning, March 26. Jake wanted to bail. He said we should ditch the bikes and navigate out using his military training to find the fastest route back to civilization. Marcus argued we should stick to the original plan and try to finish the route, insisting the creature was territorial and would leave us alone if we just kept moving through its range instead of lingering. I was torn. My gut said Jake was right, but I also knew abandoning the bikes out here meant committing ourselves to a deadly trek on foot through completely unfamiliar backcountry. Afternoon, March 26. We compromised, decided to keep riding, push hard, and cover the last 20 miles in one go, aiming to reach the Damascus checkpoint by dusk. That was a mistake. The creature was waiting. Around 2 p.m., as we rode a narrow stretch of trail with sheer cliffs on both sides, something enormous stepped out from behind a boulder directly in front of us. Marcus was leading and braked so hard he flipped over his handlebars. The thing was massive, easily 9 feet tall, covered in dark brown hair. Its face, part human, but with a pronounced brow ridge and a jaw built to crush bone. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then it roared. The sound defies description in Devon's journal, but the audio captured by the GoPro confirmed it. A deep, resonant bellow, part enraged gorilla, part bear's roar, and something far more sinister. Later analysis showed the vocal range would require vocal cords much larger than any known animal. Evening, March 26. We were trapped. The creature didn't directly attack in the afternoon, but it made its intentions crystal clear. After Marcus's crash, Jake and I got him back on his bike and tried to retreat, only to find every path blocked fallen trees, rock slides that hadn't been there hours earlier, even what looked like deliberate barricades of branches and debris. We were being herded somewhere, and I doubted it was anywhere we wanted to be. The final entries in Devon's journal reveal the group's rising despair as they realized they weren't just being stalked, they were being systematically funneled toward what Jake identified as a predator's chosen kill zone. His military experience recognized it immediately. Isolate the prey, control their movement, then finish them in terrain of the predator's choosing. Night, March 26. We set up what might be our last camp, no options left. Daylight was fading, and we found ourselves in a small clearing hemmed in by thick forest with no real escape routes. Jake positioned us defensively with our backs to a massive rock, but we all knew it wouldn't be enough. The creature circled just beyond the light, its heavy breathing audible, branches snapping under its weight. Occasionally we caught glimpses of its hulking silhouette moving between the trees. Marcus filmed constantly, determined to leave some kind of record for rescuers or investigators. March 27, pre-dawn. This may be my last entry. The attack started around midnight. Not full assaults, but probing, testing our defenses, our resolve, our weapons. It would charge the edge of the firelight, roar, then retreat. Each time closer, each time staying longer. Jake fired 3 warning shots, but they only seemed to enrage it. By 3 a.m., it began hurling rocks and branches from the darkness. Some were boulders so massive, it would take unbelievable strength just to lift them, let alone throw. One smashed Jake's bike, twisting the frame beyond repair. Dawn, March 27. The final attack is coming. As the first light spread through the trees, the creature pulled back, but we could still hear it circling, waiting. Jake believes it wants daylight, it wants to see us clearly when it strikes. Marcus positioned himself to capture whatever happens next on camera. I've hidden this journal and the backup GoPro card in case anyone finds this camp after us. If you're reading this, know that we fought. We tried to survive. But some things in these mountains are older and stronger than we ever imagined. The journal ends there, but the recovered GoPro footage continued for another 43 minutes, capturing their final encounter in chilling detail. The video shows the massive creature emerging from the tree line as daylight strengthens, advancing on the biker's defensive position with deliberate, predatory intent. Jake's military training is evident as he tries to coordinate their defense, but the creature's size, strength, and intelligence quickly overwhelm their preparations. The attack is swift and brutal. The creature targets Jake first, neutralizing him with devastating blows before turning on Marcus, who keeps filming even as he runs. Most disturbing is the creature's behavior. It doesn't act like a frenzied wild animal, but with calculated precision. It destroys their bikes and communication gear as if understanding their purpose. At times, it even glances directly into the lens, eyes burning with something that can only be described as malevolent intelligence. The final recovered minutes show Devin sprinting desperately through the forest, the camera jolting violently as he runs. His ragged breathing, pounding footsteps, and the creature's guttural roars echo through the recording. The footage ends abruptly when he seems to fall, the camera flipping into darkness. Forensic analysis of the recovered evidence paints a grim picture of their last hours. The campsite showed massive disruption consistent with an assault by something unimaginably powerful. Claw marks scored trees up to 10 feet high, and scattered gear bore signs of crushing force. Most telling were the plaster casts of tracks surrounding the site over 18 inches long, with distinct toe impressions indicating a bipedal creature of enormous size. Biological samples from Jake and Marcus's remains were analyzed, revealing degraded DNA from an unknown primate species, sharing traits with both humans and great apes. The condition of the samples, however, prevented any conclusive identification. Forensic experts analyzed the GoPro footage and confirmed its authenticity. Frame-by-frame analysis revealed consistent details of the creature across multiple clips, distinctive scar patterns, asymmetrical limb proportions, and facial features that remained constant throughout the encounter. The footage was run through every known digital manipulation detection technique, and no evidence of tampering was found. Wildlife specialists initially suggested the attack might have been carried out by a large bear, possibly one diseased or injured enough to alter its normal behavior patterns. That theory was quickly dismissed once the physical evidence was reviewed. The footprint measurements, claw mark patterns, and attack behavior did not match any known bear species. Moreover, bears typically avoid direct confrontations with humans and rarely engage in the kind of systematic stalking documented in the Cyclists' account. A second theory proposed, the group encountered a feral human, someone who had lived in the wilderness for years and become dangerously territorial. That explanation also failed to account for the physical evidence, especially the creature's size and strength. No human, under any condition, could have produced the tracks found at the scene or inflicted the type of damage documented on the victims and their gear. The most compelling theory, supported by both physical evidence and eyewitness testimony, is that the cyclists encountered a Sasquatch, or a similar hidden species. The Appalachian Range has a long history of Bigfoot sightings, with hundreds of reports going back to Native American oral traditions. The creature's behavior, as recorded in Devon's journal territory marking, intelligent stalking, systematic herding of prey, aligns with patterns described in numerous other Bigfoot encounters across North America. Especially notable was the creature's apparent understanding of human technology and tactics. Its ability to block escape routes, disable equipment, and counter Jake's military defenses indicates a level of intelligence beyond any known animal. Such cognitive abilities, combined with its physical power, would make a creature like this an apex predator in the dense backcountry environment of the Appalachian Trail. Despite extensive search efforts, Devon's body was never recovered. Some investigators hypothesize he may have survived the initial encounter and later died from exposure or injuries while trying to escape the wilderness. Others suggest a more troubling possibility that the creature captured him alive and took him deeper into the forest, for reasons still unknown. Thermal imaging flights over the area in the weeks after the discovery picked up several heat signatures in remote zones that could not be positively identified. Ground teams were dispatched to investigate, but the terrain proved too hazardous for thorough exploration. A handful of accessible sites showed signs of disturbance, torn vegetation, unusual scent traces, and additional track evidence, but no sign of Devon or any other human remains. The ongoing mystery of Devon's disappearance added another layer of tragedy to an already horrifying case. His family continues to hold out hope that he somehow survived and is living somewhere in the backcountry, possibly injured or suffering from memory loss. Survival experts who analyzed the terrain and March weather conditions, however, believe it's virtually impossible for someone to endure alone there for an extended period, especially given the late winter conditions and lack of proper survival gear. The incident has had a significant impact on outdoor recreation in the region. The specific Appalachian Trail segment where the attack occurred was closed indefinitely, with warning signs posted at nearby trailheads. Local authorities increased patrols in the area, though rangers privately acknowledge they have no clear protocol for dealing with a creature of this type. The case has also drawn attention from cryptozoologists and paranormal investigators worldwide. Numerous expeditions have been launched to search for evidence of the creature, though none have succeeded in establishing contact or collecting additional proof. Some researchers suggest media coverage may have driven the creature deeper into the wilderness, making future encounters less likely. Wildlife officials maintain that the fatalities were most likely caused by a known predator, perhaps a bear or a mountain lion. Despite evidence to the contrary, the official stance has frustrated the victims' families, who believe the government is deliberately suppressing information about the true nature of the threat. Freedom of Information Act requests seeking more details about the investigation were denied, citing public safety concerns and ongoing law enforcement operations. The deaths of Jake Rodriguez and Marcus Thompson, along with the disappearance of Devon Matthews, represent one of the most thoroughly documented and most disturbing Bigfoot encounters in modern history. The combination of physical evidence, eyewitness accounts, and video documentation provides compelling support for the existence of an unknown primate species in North America's wilderness. For the victims' families, the case is not only a personal tragedy, but also a bitter disappointment with official responses that seem to prioritize public relations over truth and justice. They continue to push for a more honest investigation of the evidence and better protections for outdoor enthusiasts who venture into remote areas. The broader outdoor community has been forced to confront uncomfortable questions about the risks inherent in backcountry adventure sports. While bear attacks and other wildlife encounters are well-documented risks that can be mitigated with proper precautions, the possibility of encountering an intelligent, aggressive creature actively hunting humans presents challenges current safety protocols aren't designed to address. In Devon's final journal entry, he wrote, "Some things in these mountains are older and stronger than we ever imagined." That line has become a sobering reminder that despite humanity's technological progress and scientific understanding, there may still be forces in the natural world beyond our comprehension or control. The Appalachian Trail incident stands as a testament to the courage of three friends who pursued their passion for adventure even in the face of unimaginable horror. Their story is both a warning about the dangers that may lurk in our most remote wildlands and a compelling piece of the ongoing debate over the existence of creatures science has yet to acknowledge or understand. But sadly, terrible things keep happening in the Appalachians because that wasn't the only tragic event out there. I never thought I'd write this story. Even now, 3 months later, my hands still shake when I think about what happened on the Appalachian Trail in late October 2025. People ask why I'm sharing this publicly, and the truth is simple. Someone needs to know what's really going on in those mountains. What I lived through in those 12 hours changed everything I thought I knew about the backcountry and about what shares it with us. My name is Kelly Morrison, and I'm a 8-year-old nurse from Asheville, North Carolina. I've section hiked the Appalachian Trail for more than 6 years, completing about 800 of its 2,190 miles. I'm no novice. I know how to read weather patterns, recognize dangerous wildlife, and survive overnight in remote country. That experience is probably the only reason I'm alive to tell this. The 25th of October 2025 started like any other weekend hike. Sarah, my best friend from college, drove down from Richmond to join me on a relaxed 3-day, 2-night trek we'd planned through the AT's Pisgah National Forest section. Sarah's fairly new to serious hiking, but she's fit, enthusiastic, and had done a few overnights with me over the last year. We chose a popular 24-mile loop that would take us through some of western North Carolina's prettiest terrain. The forecast was perfect, cool fall temps in the mid-50 seconds by day, dipping into the low 40 seconds at night, clear skies, no rain expected. Peak leaf season had just passed, but the ridges still glowed orange and deep red. I picked Sarah up at her Asheville hotel at 7 a.m. She practically bounced with excitement when we loaded our gear into my Subaru Forester. We had spent weeks planning this trip, carefully checking packing lists and meal plans. Sarah had just invested in a new lightweight backpacking setup and was eager to test it out. The drive to the trailhead took us along winding mountain roads that climbed steadily through small Appalachian communities. We stopped for coffee and a few last-minute supplies at a grocery store in a little town called Bear Creek, population 847, according to the faded sign. The clerk, an older mountain man with kind eyes, noticed our packs and asked about our hiking plans. When I mentioned the route we intended to take, he paused for a long moment, studying us carefully. Finally, he said something I've replayed in my head 1,000 times since. "Y'all be real careful out there. There've been some strange reports from that area lately. Folks hearing things that don't make sense." I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head and muttered something about mountain stories before ringing up our purchase. At the time, I brushed it off as nothing more than local folklore. Every rural community has its own legends and superstitions. I'd heard dozens of warnings like that over the years, everything from black bears to wild boars to rumors of reclusive mountain folk living off the grid. None of it seemed like anything more than campfire tales. We pulled into the trailhead parking lot around 9:30 a.m. The sky was clear, the sun bright, and only a light breeze stirred the treetops. The lot was nearly empty, just our car and an old pickup with Virginia plates. Midweek in October on the AT is usually quiet compared to summer weekends, which was exactly what we were hoping for. Sarah and I went through our usual pre-hike routine, checking our packs, reviewing the route on the map, and taking photos by the trail marker. We'd both been looking forward to this trip for months, and the excitement was infectious. The plan was to hike about 8 miles to our first campsite near a mountain stream, spend the night, then push another 10 miles to a scenic overlook for our second night before completing the loop back to the car. The first few miles were just what we expected. The trail wound through dense hardwood forest with occasional glimpses of distant ridgelines through the trees. We quickly fell into our normal hiking rhythm. Sarah was chatty during the first hour, telling stories from her job as a graphic designer, while I mostly listened and soaked in the peace of the woods around us. As we gained elevation, the forest began to change. Deciduous trees gave way to a mix of hardwoods and pines, and the understory grew thicker and more tangled. We stopped for lunch at a small clearing near mile marker 4, splitting sandwiches and trail mix while enjoying a sweeping view of the valley below. That's when I noticed something was off. The forest was too quiet. In 6 years of hiking this area, I'd grown accustomed to the steady background of bird song, squirrels chattering, and the hum of insects. But as we sat there, I realized the woods around us were almost completely silent. No birds, no rustling in the brush, no buzzing flies. Even the wind seemed to have died. Sarah noticed it too. She stopped mid-story about one of her coworkers, glanced around, and her face tightened with unease. We sat in that eerie silence for several minutes, both of us instinctively lowering our voices. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the time of day, or the elevation, or some natural phenomenon I wasn't familiar with. But something about the silence felt wrong. Unnatural in a way that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We packed up lunch and pressed on, but the heavy silence followed us. Mile after mile, the woods stayed unsettlingly still. Even the sound of our boots on the trail seemed muted, as if the very air was swallowing up the noise. By 3 p.m., we had covered about 6 miles. That's when Sarah spotted something that made us both stop in our tracks. Off to the left of the trail, about 20 feet into the woods, stood a tree that had been completely stripped of its bark. Not just damaged, stripped clean, as if something had deliberately peeled away the outer layer in long vertical strips. We stepped off the trail to take a closer look. It was a mature oak, maybe 8 inches across. The bark had been ripped away, starting about 4 feet off the ground and reaching nearly 12 feet up, well beyond the height any black bear could manage. The pale wood underneath was scarred with what looked like deep claw marks gouged into the core. Sarah pulled out her phone to snap pictures, but I was more focused on the ground around the tree. The forest floor was thick with leaf litter, yet I could make out impressions in the soft earth. Long, broad shapes unlike any animal tracks I'd ever seen. The largest print was massive, easily twice the size of my hiking boot. It showed 5 distinct toes, with what looked like drag marks extending beyond each one. The heel was deep and wide, suggesting whatever made it was unbelievably heavy. What unsettled me most was the pattern. The prints were bipedal, lined up like a walking stride. They looked human, but much larger and spaced far farther apart. I crouched down and set my hand beside one of the clearer impressions. My hand, not exactly small, looked tiny in comparison. Whatever left those tracks had to be enormous, at least 8 feet tall, maybe more. Sarah was growing uneasy. She kept glancing over her shoulder and asked if we should turn back. I felt torn between the curiosity of a seasoned hiker and the rising sense of dread gnawing at me. The rational part of my brain insisted there had to be a logical explanation, maybe a prank, or evidence of some unknown bear behavior, or even tracks left by someone using fake Bigfoot feet. But the tree damage was too extensive, too high off the ground, to be a simple hoax. And the tracks themselves looked disturbingly natural, weathered by recent rain, with subtle variations in depth and definition that would be nearly impossible to fake. After taking a few photos and marking the GPS coordinates, we decided to press on to our planned campsite. We still had 2 miles to go, and the sun would be down in just a couple of hours. Neither of us wanted to be caught out on the trail after dark, especially not after what we'd just discovered. By the time we reached the campsite near the stream, the sun was dipping low. It was a beautiful spot, a small clearing beside a clear mountain creek, surrounded by towering pines and dense rhododendron. Under normal circumstances, it would have been perfect, but something felt wrong the moment we arrived. The oppressive silence had only deepened, and now it was joined by a gnawing sensation like we were being watched. Both Sarah and I kept glancing over our shoulders, scanning the tree line. We pitched the tent quickly and efficiently, working mostly in silence. Normally, the familiar rhythm of setting up camp gave me comfort, but not tonight. Every shadow seemed to hide something waiting just out of sight. Every shadow felt like a threat, and each rustle of the branches made my heart race. As night fell, we built a small fire and cooked dinner. The flames offered a little comfort, casting a warm circle of light against the vast darkness of the forest. But even with the fire, I couldn't shake the sense that something was out there, just beyond the glow, watching us. Around 9 p.m., we heard the first sound that didn't belong. It was low and guttural, somewhere between a growl and a howl. It didn't match any animal sound I'd ever heard, and every instinct in my body screamed danger. Sarah grabbed my hand, her eyes wide with fear. We sat frozen by the fire, straining to catch whatever came next. Minutes later, the forest fell back into its eerie silence. Then the sound came again, closer this time, and not just from one place. It came from several directions at once, as if we were surrounded. These weren't random calls of wildlife. There was a rhythm, a back-and-forth pattern that suggested communication. That's when I made the decision to put out the fire. The light, though comforting, made us too visible. We retreated into the tent, but neither of us slept. We lay inside our sleeping bags, fully clothed, listening as the noises carried on through the night. They grew louder with every passing hour. Sometimes it seemed like they were coming from the trees above us, other times from the stream or forest floor nearby. Once, I heard heavy footsteps circling our campsite, but when I unzipped the tent to look, there was nothing but darkness. Dawn finally crept in, a dull gray light filtering through the canopy. Sarah hadn't slept either, not more than a few minutes at a time. We stepped out, exhausted and tense, but relieved to have made it through the night. The forest around our campsite showed signs of activity. Large rocks had been moved from their places. Branches that had been whole the night before were now broken and scattered across the clearing. Most unsettling of all, we found a fresh ring of massive tracks just like the ones from the day before, circling our tent completely. We broke camp quickly. Neither of us wanted to stay another moment. Our original plan had been to push deeper into the backcountry for a second night, but without discussion, we both knew we needed to get back to civilization as fast as possible. The problem was, we were still 18 miles from the trailhead, and the shortest route back cut through some of the most remote sections of the trail. We had no choice but to push forward, hoping we could cover the distance before dark. We set off at first light, hiking hard, barely speaking. The silence of the forest hadn't lifted. If anything, it felt more hostile than before. Every shadow seemed dangerous. Every sound made us jump. By 10 a.m., we stopped at a trail junction to rest. Sarah unfolded the map while I listened, and that's when I heard it. A branch snapping ahead of us. Not the quick crack of a small animal moving through brush. This was loud, something massive forcing its way through the trees without any effort to hide. Then I saw it. About 50 yards ahead, a towering figure stepped onto the trail. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. It was upright, bipedal, human-like, but enormous, at least 8 feet tall, covered in thick black hair. Its shoulders were impossibly broad, its arms hanging well below the knees. It stopped in the middle of the trail and looked straight at us. The face was a horrifying blend of human and ape, intelligent eyes set beneath a heavy brow, a broad forehead, and massive, yellowed teeth bared in a snarl. Then it opened its mouth and let out the same guttural call we'd heard all night. Sarah screamed. The sound triggered something in the creature. It lunged forward, closing ground with a terrifying speed for something so huge. I grabbed Sarah's hand and we ran. Not a controlled retreat, not a hiker's escape plan. This was raw panic, a desperate sprint for survival. Behind us, I could hear the creature tearing through the forest, gaining on us with ease. We veered off the main trail, crashing into the undergrowth, praying the thickets might slow it down. Branches shredded our clothes and packs as we fought through the rhododendron and deadfall. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but adrenaline kept me moving. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, we ducked behind a massive boulder, gasping for breath. The forest was silent again. No pursuit, no crashing branches, no guttural cries. Just that suffocating, unnatural quiet. Relief barely had time to set in before Sarah went rigid beside me. She was staring over my shoulder, her face pale with terror. I turned and my blood turned to ice. Standing less than 20 feet away was another one, even bigger than the first, watching us with a chilling intelligence. It had crept up in total silence, moving through the woods as if it weighed nothing at all. That's when the realization hit me. We weren't being chased by a single creature. We were being hunted by a group, coordinated, strategic, intelligent in ways no animal should be. The next 12 hours were the most terrifying of my life. At least 4 of them stalked us, working together like wolves running deer. They never came close enough for us to see them clearly, but they were always there at the edge of our vision, pushing us deeper into the wilderness. Their hunting strategy was terrifyingly deliberate. They anticipated our moves, cutting off every possible escape. When we tried to return to the main trail, one of them would appear ahead, blocking the way. When we attempted to climb a steep ridge to gain advantage, they materialized above us, forcing us back down into the valley. And the worst part, the way they toyed with us. Time and again, they could have caught us easily, but they held back, letting us run, almost savoring the chase, as if this was sport, as if the hunt itself was their entertainment. Sarah began to break down, asking over and over why they didn't just kill us. I had no answer, but deep down, I began to fear the truth, that what they had planned for us was far worse than a quick death. By late afternoon, we were completely spent, disoriented, and lost. We had no trail, no bearings, just blind instinct guiding us through terrain that grew more rugged with every step. The terrain was brutal. Our water was running out, and we were too terrified to stop and filter more from the streams we'd passed. By around 2 p.m., we made a critical mistake. In our desperation to escape the things hunting us, we began climbing steadily uphill, convinced the ridge ahead might lead us back towards civilization. Instead, we found ourselves funneled into a box canyon, sheer cliffs on 3 sides and only one way out the same path we had entered. That's when they emerged. The creatures stepped out from the tree line, no longer in a hurry, but deliberate, almost leisurely. They had us exactly where they wanted. 5 of them in total, 2 massive males, a slightly smaller female, and 2 younger ones that were still larger than any human I'd ever seen. The biggest male was clearly the leader. He stood at least 9 feet tall, with shoulders impossibly broad and arms that reached down nearly to his knees. His face, disturbingly expressive, carried something I can only describe as satisfaction, like a hunter pleased with the successful end of a chase. Sarah was sobbing beside me, but I found myself staring at them with a strange, detached clarity. These weren't just animals. There was too much intelligence, too much strategy, too much coordination in their behavior. Yet they weren't human either. They were something else entirely, something that wasn't supposed to exist, outside of cryptozoology, documentaries, and internet forums. The leader made a sound that chilled me to the bone. Not a roar, not a growl, something closer to speech. A series of guttural grunts and clicks that the others clearly understood. The female and one of the young ones began circling to flank us, while the second male stayed back with the leader, blocking our only exit. That's when it hit me. They weren't planning to kill us right away. They were going to take us alive. I don't know where my courage came from. Maybe it was the realization that death was better than whatever they had planned. Maybe it was the desperate need to protect Sarah. Or maybe it was just raw survival instinct kicking in when faced with certain doom. But I acted. They'd made one mistake. They thought we were helpless. I wasn't completely unprepared. I'd carried a can of pepper spray in my pack the entire trip, and I still had my trekking pole, which could double as a weapon if it came to that. When the female moved in, I pulled the spray and unloaded it straight into her face. The effect was instant and shocking. She let out a shriek horrifyingly human-like and clawed at her eyes, stumbling backward in obvious agony. The others froze for just a moment, stunned by the unexpected attack. That brief hesitation was all I needed. I grabbed Sarah's hand, and we bolted straight toward the leader, blocking our exit. I hit him with the pepper spray too, but this time, he was ready. He turned his head, plowed through the chemical cloud, and swung one massive arm at us. His hand caught my backpack strap, ripping it clean off my shoulders as we tore past him. But we were through. We'd broken their trap. We sprinted down the canyon with everything we had. Behind us, the creatures regrouped. Their calls were different now, angry, vengeful, filled with rage. The chase that followed was worse than anything earlier that day. They weren't toying with us anymore. They wanted us dead. We could hear them crashing through the forest behind us, closing in fast. Sarah started falling behind. She'd twisted her ankle during our escape, and the pain was written across her face every time she stepped. Still, she pushed forward, driven by the same desperation fueling me. We reached a steep slope, the forest floor littered with loose rock and fallen leaves. It was dangerous terrain, even under the best conditions. But there was no choice, we had to risk it. The creatures were right on top of us. That's when Sarah fell. She slipped on a loose rock and tumbled hard, crying out as she slid several yards down the slope. I turned back to help her, but she waved me off, tears streaming down her face. Her ankle was clearly broken. She couldn't put any weight on it. She wasn't going to be able to run. The creatures would be on us in seconds. Sarah looked at me with tear-filled eyes and said the words that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Go, don't let them take us both. I wanted to argue, to carry her, to find some way to save us both, but the rational part of me knew she was right. I couldn't carry her fast enough. Staying meant we'd both be taken. So I ran. I left my best friend behind and fled for my life, hating myself with every step, but knowing it was the only choice. Behind me, I heard her scream once, just once, then silence. The next 6 hours were a blur of terror and exhaustion. I crashed through the forest like a wild animal, following game trails and stream beds, trying to put as much distance as possible between me and them. I had no idea where I was going, no map, no GPS, no compass. Just instinct and the faint hope that heading downhill would eventually lead me to civilization. For the first few hours, they still followed. I heard their guttural voices in the distance, sometimes closer, sometimes farther, but no longer coordinated like before. Maybe they were satisfied with taking Sarah. Or maybe they decided I wasn't worth the trouble anymore. By nightfall, I was in serious trouble. No shelter, no food, no water filter, no pack. My only belongings were the clothes on my back and the trekking pole still clutched in my hand. I found a shallow cave formed by a fallen tree and a pile of rocks. I crawled inside and waited out the night. I didn't dare start a fire the light could give me away. So I curled up in the darkness, shivering, forcing myself not to think about Sarah. The night dragged on endlessly. I dozed fitfully, waking at every sound, terrified they'd found me again. More than once, I heard that same guttural voice echoing faintly in the distance, but it never came closer. At last, dawn broke gray and cold. I stepped out of my shelter, utterly drained, but alive. Stiff and exhausted, but still alive. I had no idea where I was, only that I had to keep moving. Those creatures might still be looking for me, and I needed to find help for Sarah if she was still alive. I kept following the creek I'd been paralleling, hoping it would eventually lead to a road, a house, any sign of human civilization. My legs shook with fatigue, and I was badly dehydrated, but I forced myself to keep going. Around noon, I heard the best sound in the world, the distant rumble of a car engine. I followed it, crashing through the brush toward what I prayed was a road. I stumbled out of the trees onto a narrow dirt track, probably a logging access road. An old pickup was parked on the shoulder, and a man in hunting clothes sat on the tailgate eating a sandwich. I must have looked insane, covered in cuts and bruises, clothes torn to shreds, hair tangled with twigs and leaves. The hunter took one look at me and jumped up, asking if I was okay. I tried to explain what had happened, but the words came out in a breathless jumble. All I could manage was that my friend was missing, something had attacked us, and I needed to call for rescue. The hunter, his name was Jim, a local, drove me to the nearest town where I could contact authorities. Within hours, a large search and rescue operation was underway. State police, rangers, volunteer teams. The search for Sarah lasted 5 days. I led the teams back to the general area where I'd last seen her, but pinpointing the exact spot was impossible. The forest all looked the same, and my panicked flight had taken me across terrain that was nearly impossible to retrace even in daylight, let alone from memory. Search dogs were brought in, but they behaved strangely, reluctant to work the area where Sarah vanished. Handlers said they'd never seen anything like it. The dogs would approach the search zone, then stop and refuse to go farther, whining and trying to turn back. Helicopters with thermal imaging flew grid patterns over the forest, but found no sign of Sarah or of the creatures I described. Ground teams combed miles of wilderness, followed every stream, checked every cave and rock formation. On day 3, they found something. Sarah's backpack, or what was left of it. It had been completely destroyed, not just damaged, but systematically torn apart, as if something had been searching for items inside. Her belongings were scattered over a wide area, and some things were never found. But there was no trace of Sarah. No body, no blood, no indication of what happened after I left her. The official search was called off after 5 days, but I hired a private team to continue. They spent another week in the forest and found nothing beyond what the rescue teams had already discovered. Sarah is officially classified as missing, presumed dead. The official report states she was likely killed by a bear or some other wild animal, and that her body was dragged off and consumed. Investigators were skeptical of my account of the creatures, though they were too polite to say so directly. I've spent the last 3 months trying to process what happened on that mountain. I've gone to therapy. I've joined trauma survivor support groups. I've tried to go back to my normal life as a nurse in Asheville, but normal doesn't feel possible anymore. I can't hike. I can't even walk through the small patch of woods behind my apartment without panicking. The sight of trees makes me think of those creatures, and the sound of wind in the leaves brings back Sarah's last scream. I've researched everything I can about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and other cryptid sightings in the Appalachians. I've learned there have been dozens of similar encounters over the years, many involving hikers and campers who vanished without a trace. Most reports are dismissed as hoaxes or misidentifications, but now I know better. I also know the creatures I encountered are smarter and more dangerous than most people realize. They hunt in coordinated groups. They use sophisticated tactics. They seem to have a deep understanding of human behavior. They're not just animals. They're apex predators with near-human intelligence, and they see us as prey. I've tried to get officials to take my account seriously, to warn other hikers about the danger, but no one wants to listen. They're afraid of causing panic, afraid of hurting tourism, afraid of being labeled pseudoscience believers, so I'm telling my story here. I hope someone will believe me. I hope someone will listen. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to be careful. If you plan to hike in the Appalachians, especially in remote sections, please consider the possibility that you might not be alone out there. Sarah was an experienced hiker, a strong woman, and my best friend. She didn't deserve what happened. If sharing her story keeps even one person from meeting the same fate, maybe her death won't be completely meaningless. Those creatures are still out there. They're still hunting, and next time, they might not let anyone get away. I think about Sarah every day. I carry the guilt of leaving her, and maybe I always will. But I also carry the responsibility to warn others about what waits in those dark woods. Be careful out there. Be very careful. Kelly Morrison is a nurse from Asheville, North Carolina. She has hiked the Appalachian Trail for 6 years and completed roughly 800 of its 2,190 miles. Sarah remains missing, presumed dead. The search for her continues.